There you are. Good morning.
Ciao, buongiorno.
Ciao, ciao. Benissimo, allora possiamo cominciare. Grazie a tutti di esservi collegati, grazie a Luis, anche perché Luis ci parla dal Canada occidentale ed essendoci 9 ore di fuso orario di differenza sono le 6 del mattino, per cui la nostra gratitudine è ulteriormente accentuata da questo. Luis è il CEO di un MSP che si chiama OOK, scritto OOK, e ha accettato il nostro invito a partecipare a questa serie di incontri a filo diretto. Credo che OOK sia solo, cioè credo, sono certo che OOK sia l'ultima incarnazione dell'esperienza di Luis come MSP, nel senso che è un veterano dell'ambiente e ha cominciato a lavorare e a offrire servizi gestiti già diversi anni fa. Il webinar si svolgerà in inglese, credo che il nostro inglese sarà piuttosto comprensibile. Io sono italiano, quindi è facile. Luis è colombiano, non per questo il suo inglese non è perfetto, però diciamo che non è cattivo come potrebbero essere gli AC/DC. Vi prego di non esitare a fare domande. Se volete farle direttamente in inglese, perfetto, se no fatele pure in italiano e io le tradurrò per Luis, posto che ve ne sia bisogno, perché come vi dicevo Luis diciamo, qualche cosa di italiano mastica. And with that, without further ado, Luis, thank you so much for being with us. And
Prego.
prego, okay.
Io ho capito tutto.
Yeah, non avevo dubbi. So, yeah, that's why I watch my language. So thank you so much for being with here. And I would like to start off by asking you to introduce yourself and give us an overview about your experience throughout the years in the MSP space.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for inviting me and for the opportunity to chat. It's always great to have sort of a informal conversation. It just makes it easy to sort of talk about things and business and so on without such a formal agenda. Yeah, you know, like many people that are MSPs today, I started with residential break fix in the beginning. I actually have had a career as a musician before becoming full-time in IT. And I actually started by becoming a salesperson at a computer store. And so I music-focused salesperson. It was at the time when Apple had come out with GarageBand and there was a big resurgence of music production on the Mac. So that was how I sort of got started in computers, and that was back in 2005. In 2006, I left that Apple's reseller and I started doing setup and delivery of computers for local residents, and some of those brought me into their businesses, and over time that sort of moved into more of a business focused type of service, mostly break fix at that time still. And by 2010, 2011, I started to sort of make the transition into contract-based type of services and trying to do more of the recurring revenue approach to business. And then in 2011, I was acquired by a fairly large MSP here in Vancouver called Fully Managed. And I was there for about a year, but that was also sort of the time period in which I was forced to drop all my break fix clientele and move to strictly a contract-based flow, because the MSP actually did not really do a break fix. It was only contracts. And when I left and went back on my own, only my contract customers came back with me. At that point, I sort of got a fresh start in only recurring revenue type customers or contract-based customers. And from 2012 onwards, sort of the rest is history. From there, I just only did MSP type recurring revenue services and contracts. In 2013, I brought on a business partner. In 2016, a second business partner. 2018, we did a small acquisition, and now we're a team of 5. And so, an interesting story. And this whole time, it's been a very intentional growth.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that I think it's easy to sort of get pulled into the idea that you have to grow in sales and marketing. But I think something always has to give when you do those things. And so if you become a very high sales or high velocity sales organization, your service could suffer because it's really difficult to scale both at the same time. And especially if you're a small organization and you're the owner and you're the reason why many of your customers want to work with you, it becomes even more difficult. And so with having been at a larger MSP and having seen the difficulty of the turnover, you know, your tier one engineers are cycling around out all the time. The revolving door, as I call it, account managers are coming and leaving the business. I could see the impact this would have on clients, and it was just not a great experience for them in general.
Yeah.
So I knew there just had to be a better way, and so we wanted to just focus on growing with those customers and growing a little bit more slowly, but helping them become better relationships for us and us better fit for them. So we've grown always very slowly, very intentionally, in that we don't try to go and do sales because we know our service delivery would suffer.
But so when you say slowly, what do you mean? If you can share that figure with us.
Yeah. So I think one of the challenges with sales and marketing is that you have to be very consistent. And so it requires a real sort of dedication to keeping a pace and a structure to how you do that process. And if you're doing it well, it works. You actually have a lot of potential business coming through, or you hope it works anyways. But also the challenge is that in our case, we are small, and so I would, of all the people that work in our business, I would probably be the most inclined to do sales and marketing. But I also am very technical, and I am the primary relationship for many of our clients. We have an interesting model because my two business partners are each responsible for their own group of clients. And
Okay.
so we have sort of this pod approach to our clients, as opposed to sort of tier one engineers, tier two engineers, tier three engineers. We actually have a senior consultant with a junior, and they look after 15 clients or 20 clients. Myself and a junior consultant, we look after 10, 15 clients. And then my third business partner, the same thing. So we're a little bit compartmentalized that way. And so it's not as easy for me to step away from my group of clients to just do sales and marketing. And so we just don't have the ability to take on new clients at a pace that would be like that. We don't want to very quickly grow or have to deal with staff that come and go all the time.
Yeah.
We want to take our time in how we grow our staff and how we groom our people, so that we can continue this model of growing each individual pod of senior consultant with a junior consultant. I actually have a slide of what that looks like. Let me see if I can present this real quick. Maybe this will work. How's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the idea is each of these senior consultants will work with a junior and support a group of customers. We call them a pod. And so where we want to go is obviously grow each of those individual pods with more juniors and supporting sort of slightly larger customers. The idea being is that each of these pods knows those groups of customers very, very well. And so this allows for any one of these folks to be able to leave the business and not necessarily impact the customer or the relationship with the customer with us. I think it's difficult in a multi-tier support organization when one of those engineers was their customer's favorite and they leave. It's really tough. The customer ends up training the new person, and it can be difficult on the relationship.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I think that your size resonates with that of most of the people who are connected today. And we have to talk about the elephant in the room. I'm sure you did all your planning at the end of 2019, and 2020 is starting, and you have all your ducks in a row, and then the pandemic hits. And this has posed several challenges to any entity, but also in particular to service providers. So, well, first off, at least in Italy, overnight, 90% of the customers wanted to start working from home, which they haven't done at all until that very day. Some of those customers would struggle economically and financially. And, you know, very basic things like visiting the customer to work and to foster the relationship was just not possible any longer. Did you encounter any of these hurdles, any of these problems? And if so, what did you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And we had, I think there was maybe a 2 to 3 week period when um, the initial restrictions were sort of being put in place, and there was sort of the real conversion of people from going to, like, you know, is this real, to, oh, this is real, and realizing, you know, I don't feel comfortable coming into work, and you know, some businesses trying to figure out how to decide whether they could send everybody home or not. So there was definitely some decision making for about a week or 2 weeks. And then in many cases, we actually were very quick to send out an email to all our customers to say, hey, we're here. Please keep us in the loop with any of your plans for remote work, because we want to and need to be involved. Another interesting challenge was in some cases we have customers that have retail type operations, and they were forced to close, and many of them had to lay off a number of their staff. And so there's also the security aspect of, okay, what are we going to do with all those accounts of people that are officially no longer working for those companies? So there's definitely a little bit of a crunch there in deciding what to do. But I think we got lucky in the sense that we've always had a standards-based approach to our customers and how we set them up. And so anytime we are working with a new customer, we've always gone through the process of setting up their VPN to talk to their Active Directory. And we have every computer managed with RMM properly. And so in many cases, our customers were like, well, can we send our staff home with their computers? So we had to think, okay, let me see what this is going to look like. In the case of a few of our Mac customers, I was able to, with our RMM, push out a script that added the VPN connection and deployed a configuration profile with the VPN settings. And ultimately, it's like, yeah, as long as everybody knows their network password, they can basically go home, and here's a little PDF document on how to connect and go nuts. And so obviously the first few days or week and a half or so, we were literally taking appointments, 15-minute appointments, to help anybody that needed help with their remote setups, because we stopped going on site as well. So that was something that was introduced a little bit of a challenge. But we set up Calendly. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the service. It's a scheduling service that integrates with our Office 365. And so we opened up our calendars. We were working from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And just say, we sent out emails to all our customers, be like, if anybody needs an appointment with us, just hit the calendar here and book 15 minutes. And our calendars literally started filling in with appointments of people that needed some help with my computer's not working at home, or my VPN's not working, and things like that. So that was definitely 2 weeks of nonstop, like 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Calendar appointments. But I think customers very much appreciated that we made ourselves available, that we were able to resolve the challenges quickly, and that people ultimately could work and continue what they needed to do. So that was from a technical perspective, obviously. I think from a personal one and the relationship side of things, it's definitely been difficult, because we are used to going on site and seeing our customers and chatting with the people and all that. But we've always had an outcomes-based approach to the relationship. You know, can people do the work? Is their stuff working, and their servers are up, and all that stuff? I've chatted with a few MSPs who have had difficulty because a lot of their contracts are predicated on offering a certain number of on-site hours, for example, every month. And all of a sudden they're not delivering those hours. So the value of their contract is coming into question. And clients are like, well, you know, we can't keep paying you since you're not coming on site. And that really sort of struck a chord with me because this really told me how important it was that we sort of moved away from that hourly idea or the exchange for time and money, more towards the exchange of expertise for value. And so that's been a big differentiator. Only the clients that had to lay off a number of people had really come to talk to us about, reduction in fees or anything like that.
Right.
Everybody else basically continued status quo.
Okay. Just a question. Did you charge for those a high number of 15 minutes session, or were they just involved included in the whole thing?
It's interesting because I think the initial reaction that I had was one of our customers actually said, hey, we want to set up everybody for VPN for remote. Can you let me know how much that's going to cost? And I just couldn't, I think this is just a personal feeling, of course. I just couldn't come to terms with the idea that I would charge for
Okay.
that. And so we didn't. It was just, and I came to later rationalize that decision a little better. There's this guy I listened to. He has a podcast and he has a email column he writes every Friday. His name is Robert Glazer. I'll put his name in the chat. I highly recommend him. He's actually a venture capitalist, but and so a lot of people think of venture capitalists as cold and greedy, but I call him a woke venture capitalist. He's very tuned into sort of emotional companies and emotional decisions and the right thing to do. Robert Glazer. His column is called Friday Forward, and his podcast is called Elevate Podcast. Anyways, he constantly brings on some really, really high, heavy hitter talent to his podcast to give really valuable advice. And it's always interesting to me that all this advice is given freely. I don't think the value is in the time. The value isn't sort of in the outcomes. And this has always been the position I've taken with our own clients. We don't charge for our time. We charge for the results. And so
the value that you deliver. Yeah. Do you think that this is a pretty romantic question, so bear with me, but do you think that the gratitude of your customer has increased? You know what I mean? So do you think this was an occasion to strengthen the relationship to them?
I would hope that's a result of it. But at the same time, I personally take issue with the whole, hey, look at how great we were to you.
Solicited gratitude is not gratitude.
So I didn't want it to, I'm not looking for it to become a self-serving prophecy. We definitely just did what we felt was the right thing to do. If that's results in the strengthening of the relationships, I think that's a fantastic outcome. But what Robert Glazer talks about, which I want to point out, is that in one of his recent columns, he talks about the 10-10-10 rule. And the 10-10-10 rule is essentially about making decisions. And how are you going to feel about your decision in 10 minutes, in 10 weeks, or in 10 years? And so it really started to resonate with me, the idea that what people and companies are doing or behaving in a situation of turmoil like the pandemic is going to be very transcendental. I think it has to have a lot of impact on their customer base, on their employees, and ultimately it creates a value. It just sort of exposes the value of the business in that sense. And so I think it's an opportunity to sort of cement who you are from a business value perspective or values perspective, so that customers get to know you and your business as such.
Perfect. Let's go back to those customers of yours who had some issues and some struggles, for instance, those who had to lay off staff. Which is a perfect segue to the next topic, which is about customers having trouble paying, so financial troubles in this particular case. And I would like to show the outcome of a very small survey that we have run with the attendees. And it's just 2 slides. I would quickly summarize the content, and then maybe you can comment on those. The first is how many of your customers were insolvent or had troubles paying. And so roughly 15% of our customers, of the MSPs, didn't have any customers who were not able to pay. And the vast majority of the MSP had less than a quarter of their customers having troubles, and then the rest were having more trouble. Actually, we have some of the guys who participated into the survey having more than 50% of their customers having financial issues. And the second question was about how to manage those insolvent customers. So what to do when the customers didn't pay, and which perfectly resonates to what you said about the customers calling you and asking to revisit the fees. And the possible options were, okay, I'm happy with receiving less money, so I waiver part of my credit. Basically, nobody chose that, which is a good thing. The majority said that they postpone the due date for the payment, and other are just waiting for a miracle to happen and for the customers to pay whenever the customer is actually able to do. And once again, only minority is suing the customer. What's your take on this figures? Do you have any comments? Do they seem reasonable to you?
Very interesting. I had not considered at any point that, well, maybe we just haven't gotten to cross that bridge yet of having a customer just not pay and having to sort of consider the legal route. But just from my own reaction to it and personality wise, I would say I would probably not pursue that option. I would hope that the relationships we've created with customers would allow us to sort of figure out a solution that doesn't involve a legal outcome. And so, and that is different for every person. I think some MSPs or some service providers have a transactional relationship with many of their customers, depends on the type of industries they support. And there's so many variables here that would, justify having to go the legal route. But there's also, a concern of the retroactive bad behavior, customers using the pandemic as an excuse to just go back and say, oh, we're not happy with the service, and so we're not going to pay. And so I think that's sort of an interesting situation that you have to deal with in a case-by-case basis. But I am certain that many of our customers saw a decrease to some of their revenue. Certainly the MSPs that are industry focused, retail and restaurants and things like that, we actually have a couple of 3 customers. One is a restaurant and 2 of them are retail operations that had to close. And so they had challenges, but it was always a conversation. It was never like, oh, we're just going to stop paying or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Also, we've been lucky here. The government has been pretty good and quick to come in and support those businesses to make sure they don't have to lay off everybody. The government put in a wage subsidy to help cover the cost of keeping people on your payroll and not have to fire everyone. So I think that has mitigated some of these concerns for us. But my opinion is that I would probably never go the legal route. If the customer really wanted to stop paying, they were coming up with reasons not to pay, my sentiment would probably be, you know what, good riddance. And I'm happy to let you go. And, things like services and subscriptions and whatnot, we almost do everything on a monthly basis these days, so that we wouldn't have any long-term commitments to anything, and we'd be very easy for us to disconnect.
Right.
I'd rather focus my efforts elsewhere. I mean, to get into a legal battle just would not be a good use of my time.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Okay, well, thanks for your comments on this. And in the interest of time, and I'm sorry because I interrupted you a few times, and so now we're running out of time, but let's broaden the scope of our conversation. And let's talk about being an MSP today and in the future, which is the $10 million question, I believe. So number one, looking at the present, nowadays, what are your suggestions to differentiate yourself from the other MSPs or from the other IT service providers? And looking ahead, how do you envision the future? And do you think that the MSPs will still be relevant in the future, or and what will they do?
Yeah. So on the differentiation question, I think ultimately it always comes down to trust. You know, we've built now our whole sort of outward presentation. People discover us, and all they see and most of what we're talking about is creating trust and the importance of the relationship, the importance of process. And if customers aren't aligned to those things, we're happy for them to move along to the next to the next person in their search. But the ones that are sort of interested in discussing those things, it helps us sort of focus on the business outcomes of the relationship. And I think that's been a big differentiator. It's really easy for a technical person that is the owner of an MSP to come in and just talk about technical things and get into sort of yeah, we can do this and we can do that and we can do this. But I think most businesses, in my experience anyways, don't necessarily care. I think those things need to be a given is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And they don't need to be sort of laid out on the table necessarily. I think businesses want to talk about, you know, how can we use technology to grow? How can we use technology to stabilize our operations? And those are more important conversations. So I was hearing a few people on the different webinars and things that have been happening lately, and one of the comments that Tim Conkle made on one of the, he's the CEO of the 20, which is a MSP for MSPs in the US, a fairly large operation. One of the comments he was making is that, you know, when you come in to bid on an opportunity with a customer, you have the chance of setting the bar. And so if you're the first to come in and you set the standard, the others that come will be compared to you.
Right.
And if you're the last to come in and you have the chance to either kill the other two proposals. And it always is going to come down to whether you're communicating your truth, I think is how it comes out. And so, yeah, it's. I think the differentiation really just comes down to understanding how you can help a business grow and be better, and just how your process works and how the relationship is going to look like. That's a great way to differentiate.
I'm sorry, but it is important that not only you take that path, but that you also communicate in a meaningful way, in an understandable way, understandable by the customer. Otherwise, it's just vaporware, isn't it?
Sure. You know, and let me give you an example of what I mean. We actually have, let me see if I can bring up this slide. We go up to, we actually communicate this this way. So we actually talk to our customers about our process. And so one of the things that I like to think about, and this is maybe the hindsight of how we've done things that has allowed me to understand that this actually works, is you have to put yourself in the shoes of the customer and think of what they want out of the relationship and what they're going to find value in, and you know, think of what your relationship looks like 2 years or 3 years down the road. What are the things you're talking about? How are you bringing value to that relationship? And then sort of reverse engineer that to talk about that up front. So we talk a lot about the risk assessment and how we help businesses find risk and mitigate risk. And you know, the relationship we have a lot is about reducing that risk for them.
Right.
We do that through our QBRs or tech strategy scorecards, and then obviously our ability to execute on doing those projects and finding those risks and eliminating those risks. So customers really like the idea of having a very process-driven approach to this. But the other thing is that it's really interesting that if you just come in to solve, many times you're coming in to solve one particular technical problem they're having. And so either the prospect is not happy with what they're paying or they're not happy with the service. It's one of the two. And so If the money's right, then you have to focus on how you do and deliver service. And it's ultimately going to come to those two things. And so planting that seed is important. I was watching this Steve Jobs video over the weekend. He was famously critical of consulting and consultants in general. He made fun of them quite a bit because they don't build anything, he says. They just sort of have this very slim layer that they get involved with, and then they have no accountability. And so it really made me think that I think our entire industry is positioned incorrectly. People think of us as consultants, but we're not consultants. We're actually builders. We actually build infrastructure for customers. We own the outcomes of everything we're doing. It's a very different type of approach. And so I've started to really think about reworking how I talk about what we do into the idea of that we're builders of technology, we're builders of outcomes for customers. And I'm hoping that that resonates with them.
Right. And a glance at the future?
I think the future is more emotional than it is today. I think we sort of, it's interesting. I grew up in Colombia. I think a lot of businesses have this maybe deep-seated idea that they have to be stoic and very hardened outside. But I think ultimately customers love working with a business that does the right thing, that says the right things, that behaves the correct way, and that ultimately they feel comfortable doing business with and feeling that they're associated with that business. And so I think if we're not putting those things out there into the world, it's going to be very difficult to attract the right kind of clientele. So I would say that the future is just more feelings and more emotions sort of coming out of businesses and building brand. This is kind of what the brand is really. So I think it's going to become more important for businesses to just build their brand.
Okay.
The MSP world, I think there's obviously a tendency for what we do to be commoditized, and I think the hourly IT, the hourly break fix is easily commoditized already. So I don't think that we're going to survive in a commoditized world necessarily. So we're trying to build value in other ways, the business outcomes, the risk mitigation, and I don't see that slowing down at all. I think customers will always need help with business aspects. But yeah, anybody can sell them Office 365 licenses. And so we try not to focus on those menial things too much.
Right. Okay, Luis. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. And I think that we can wrap it up. And so I don't know if you have a final advice for our listeners, and if not, I thank you for your time and wish you a great day. And it's going to be a long day since it's 6:30, so you're ready to rock.
Yeah, no, my only sort of parting comment was I think it's just important to find your voice and just consider how customers perceive or view your relationships and build on that. I think that's the kind of stuff that gets us through the difficult times, and people will remember those that made the right decision and took the right actions. And so don't be swayed by sort of the short-term vision of like, well, I need money right now, and so I'm going to sue this customer, because I think that can have long-term repercussions that are difficult to recover from. If that's the only way to go, I understand, but obviously it's personal opinion. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's always great to catch up. It feels like ages since we were at A Club all together, hugging and enjoying drinks and food together. And it feels like it's going to be a long time before we can do it again.
Yeah, but it will happen, definitely. Okay. Thank you so much, Luis. Take care.
Ciao.
Yes. Grazie a tutti per aver seguito questa chiacchierata con Luis Giraldo. e vi auguro buon lavoro e mi auguro che le indicazioni, i commenti e le opinioni di Luis possano esservi stati utili e possiate farne tesoro. Grazie mille a tutti voi per averci seguito e ci vediamo.